Welcome to everyone to this next virtual sales workshop. I'm welcoming you on behalf of Association of Christian Media. And it's good, we've got quite a few new people today that weren't with us last week. So what have we got? People from Groot and a few more people from Pulpit and so on. So good to have you with us today. I'd just like to introduce Brenden to you. Brenden has been at East Coast Radio in Durban for about 17 or 18 years. He's been the heart of the sales team, the creative sales team there, a team that has done extremely well nationally with advertising sales. Brenden and I met about 10 years ago at Alpha Group, Church Alpha Group meetings that we were running in Durban at the time. And then when I had my time in commercial radio in Durban, Vuma FM, Brenden, of course, was down the road at the East Coast. And he helped me create a little bit of sanity in my brain as to the things that were going on at the time. So Brenden really knows what radio sales is all about. I think you'll find that out. And this talk will be available afterwards as a recording. So if you want to refer back, you can do that. There will also be time for questions. So I think Brenden will say this, but not while he's talking, but afterwards. So just jot them down, or else you can put them on the chat. There's a chat box at the bottom of Zoom. You can put the questions up on chat as the talk goes on, and then we'll clear those at the end. Can I just pray? Father, we thank you. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. Thank you that you have called us, that you have commissioned us, and thank you for the radio stations that you've brought us to be involved in. Father, I pray for Brenden today that you'll help him to communicate clearly, help us to listen and to remember, and most of all, to put into practice what we're learning. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, Brenden. Over to you.
Awesome. And amen. Thank you so much, Dave. Really good to be online with you again. So last week we had 2 sessions that went exceptionally well. Some great questions and great feedback and sharing. So really privileged to be part of this group and to share a little bit from my experience in radio and have some great conversations later. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for joining. As Dave mentioned, my name is Brenden. I've spent most of my working career, I worked out the other day, the majority of my working career has been at the offices of East Coast Radio. I think I've been in sales for about 27 years now. I know I look young and beautiful, and you'd say, no, you, Brenden, when did you start working? And normally sales is quite stressful. So I'm quite happy to have survived this long, but 27 years in sales, 17 or 18 years if you add the freelance work that I did for East Coast Radio when I first started. And it was my first media job completely. And so absolutely loved radio, love radio people. I mentioned last week when I was chatting to the virtual group that was there, just saying that radio people, when they get together, they just need 5 minutes to start talking, and you can share very similar stories. It doesn't matter whether you're a big radio station, a small radio station, there's so many similarities and that I love. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are on Zoom. And it is a unique situation. I found this video, which I thought was very clever, of the best Zoom background ever. Having sat in on many Zoom meetings, this guy created a video of himself paying attention and nodding. And I was like, why haven't I thought of that? That's a great idea. But it is a new environment. So if there are any technical issues, please be patient with us. If there are any sound issues, please feel free to pop it into the chat, and Dave and Natalie will try and address wherever possible. But as Dave mentioned, the virtual space is not great for interactivity. I'm so much better live. I love interacting with people face to face. But in the Zoom environment, please take notes and please write your questions down. I will answer all questions that are asked. So there will be an opportunity for that, as Dave mentioned. But we're here to chat about selling airtime to small business, which is a majority of what we do in radio. And even at East Coast Radio, we have a lot of business that sits in the upper tier. But our bread and butter is the small business owner, especially here in KZN, that entrepreneurial-minded business owner. And it's a very unique sell. It's very different. We're going to be chatting later, I think tomorrow's about advertising agencies. And then next week, we're going to be chatting about government, and we're chatting small business today. But each of those is quite a unique sell. It's a unique way of communicating, and it's a unique method of deriving what their objectives are, which are all actually similar, but actually different. So we're going to chat a little bit more about what a small business is. So I thought I'd start with the simple definition. Being in South Africa, we have BEE legislation that governs a lot of things. So the first 2 points that you see there are under the BEE legislation, what a micro enterprise and a small enterprise is. And when they throw millions around like that, it doesn't sound like a small enterprise at all. So my perspective is always generally a owner-run business. Often a small business, the owner is inextricably linked to everything. They often, so similarly to community radio, where community radio, you wear many different hats. And I think even in corporate here at East Coast Radio, it's the same thing, where your role says one thing, but you actually do many things. And for a small business owner, that's one of the first things that I've noticed, is that they have their finger in many pies. Often as they start their businesses, they are the financial manager, they are the accounts payable, they are the marketing manager, they are many things. And as their business grows, they do appoint people, but that mentality of having a finger on the pulse of everything lingers with them. We have some very, very, very big businesses that started out as small businesses, clients of ours here at East Coast Radio, and their owners are very much still involved. So that's something we'll chat about. Generally, they've got 1 or 2, a small amount of branches. They've got a smaller number of staff, and then importantly, a smaller budget. And that's something that you have to work creatively around. Although there are some clients that you find have a larger budget than you think. But we'll chat about that later. So whenever I think of clients, I think of this picture here, which is a pyramid. And we segment our clients based on their spend, which is not always accurate, because there's also potential to spend. But at the top of the pyramid is the whales. We call them our A clients, our top A clients, and they spend a substantial amount of money. Then the next tier down is a slightly larger amount. Obviously, the large clients, you have very few of them. So they are at the top of the pyramid, there's less of them. The next step down is your medium-sized clients, and they've got a bit of budget to spend, and they're happy to chat about ideas and all sorts of things. And then you have one of the largest tiers, which is that bottom tier. It's not right at the bottom, it's just above that. So we call those our C clients, and that's what we're talking about today. So that is what we call our small business. Those are clients that have got enough revenue to do some advertising on your radio station. So obviously at different stations, depending on rate cards and things, that's a different entry level. And then the bottom tier of the businesses are generally businesses that are too small to do any considered advertising. So the threshold for their effectiveness on radio, they haven't reached that space yet. And there's a lot of very, very small businesses in South Africa that are like that. There's very much an entrepreneurial mindset in the country, which is great. So my focus here is on that tier. So if you go from the top, it's A, B, C, D. So we're going to be focusing very much on that C. They have got budget to spend. It's very limited, but we're going to be finding out how we get into their mind. And so if I can just jump back to the pyramid, is that you really do need to balance your time. It's like the 80-20 principle, is that you need to balance your time as to where you're going to get the best return on your investment of time, return on effort. And for us at East Coast Radio, B and C is where our bread and butter is. The medium and the small business is that's where we thrive. And if I look at my list of top clients, there's a handful that sit in the A, and then the B and the C is the mass. There's just a solid amount of B and C clients there, and we have to look after them. They need extra special care. So I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention the impact of COVID on small businesses specifically. And I think a lot of us have had those conversations with our clients or potential clients where their businesses have been devastated. There's statistics about the numbers of businesses that have closed or shrank, had to retrench staff, etc. And so it's a reality that we're operating in. And I think the first thing that a lot of us have done, and hopefully have done with our clients and our potential clients, is empathy. You would have heard a lot of that word empathy come around in the COVID time, in the post-COVID time. When I say post-COVID, I know we haven't moved on, but we're on the tail end of it now. But our language with our clients was always one of empathy in this lockdown period. It was always one of, how are you doing? How are things going? Is there anything we can do to help? We would try and offer free exposure wherever we could. We had all sorts of programs and initiatives to try and help. And it was about listening. One of our consultants said to us, it's about letting your clients bleed on you. It's quite a strong visual, but it's meant to be. And because these businesses, their livelihood is their business. So as a small business, that is their income, that is their sole income. So they've been hurt in this time. So just allow them to exhale and bleed all over you, just share their problems and help wherever you can. We have the power of influence as radio stations, so we can help wherever we can. But as we're moving from there, the word that came to mind was recovery. And the image that I got was physical therapy. So if you're coming out of a difficult time and you've been injured, and I relate that even to a business, is that you have to have a recovery plan. You have to get help. There has to be, like you see in the picture, a physical therapist. It's hard work getting out of a difficult time. It's not an easy thing. Business doesn't just start coming in and all of a sudden things are going well. So some physical therapy is needed. So the empathy conversation with small business clients is a softer conversation. The recovery conversation with clients is still got an element of softness, but it's a bit firmer now, where we want to try and help clients. So we want to try and get some exposure for them and help them regain some of the money that they've lost over this time. But to do that, we need to have an active relationship with them. And that's part of this conversation, is how do we have that conversation? What do we say? And how do we help them with what we can do, what influence we can bring with our listeners or our viewers or wherever we have. So small business is very important. It is a tough time, but it's the time to help them to make the right decisions now so that they survive. Again, a consultant that we've been chatting to is saying to us that there's going to be winners and there's going to be, unfortunately, losers in this time. I'm not talking about businesses that have closed, but business owners that are faced with a decision. Do they continue to shrink and consolidate, or do they do what they have done at the beginning of their businesses, put themselves out there and adventure out there and put some risk and some capital and some investment into growth again? Because at some stage, they're going to need to do that. And that's the kind of real conversations that we need to be having with clients and potential clients now. So some of the things that you would need to know to have a meaningful discussion with them is, what are their short-term objectives? And we'll, the next 2 slides will be pictures. You can take a picture. It'll be questions, practical questions that you can ask to have this sort of meaningful conversation with small business owners. So what are your short-term objectives? What are your long-term objectives? What are your competitors doing? And very key, what is your recovery plan? And we'll delve into that over the next 2 slides. And how does an advertising or marketing strategy plug into that? So these are the things that we need to know when we have conversations with clients. These are just a sample of some of the questions that you could ask to help uncover this information. And this process over the next 2 slides you'll see is to uncover what we're supposed to do in any sales environment, is uncover if there's a need. If there's a need that we can address, then we're in business, and that's good business. It's mutually beneficial. It's not us selling a package or just trying to get some business or hit some target. It's really about us trying to help business to get their message out there, what makes them special. So what are some of your most pressing issues? Tell me about your staff. Have you retrenched? Are they on short pay? Are you down in numbers? What's your productivity like, etc.? So each of these questions has sub-questions. Tell me about your stock levels. Are you sitting on excess amounts of stock that you need to move? Or don't you have stock? Or are you broadening what you offer? What are your locations like? Are you in the same locations? Have you had to close any branches? Have you had to move to a different spot and downscale? What are your minimum sales needed? So I spoke to a business owner the other day, and he was talking about their runway. So in a business owner's mind, and we'll get to this later, they operate in the space of numbers. Everything is a number. It's about turnaround time. It's about stock. It's about profits, about inventory that they have. So when it comes to minimum sales, it is what is the amount of product that you need to sell to get a profit into the business, and that will cover your expenses. And that creates their runway. So how long can you run this business on what you have? And cash flow is very, very important to them. So what are the minimum sales that you need as a business, as a small business, and how close are you to those numbers? And that's their measure. That's their real measure with how their business is doing. What is the best use of their capital? If they have capital to spend, are they going to invest in product? Are they going to broaden their range so they have to invest in new stock? You have to have an understanding of where they are as a business. What is their long-term goal? Where do they want to be in 5 years' time? And how are they going to get there? Where do you believe you can gain market share? What are your competitors doing? And then what measurements do you monitor with respect to advertising? So these are all meaty questions. You've got to do it in a way that comes across as caring, inquisitive, and understanding. Because it can, if you're just firing questions after questions and just taking notes without actively engaging, it really can come across as quite cold and sort of an interrogation. And that's really not the point of this. You might not even ask all of these questions in one sitting, but you've got to develop a natural curiosity, and you've got to show the small business owner that you actually care about their business. Unless you do that, you're just wasting your time. So just briefly through these: competitor activity. How much do you think your industry is down? What's different or what's unique about your offering? So what makes you unique? In my game, I came into radio writing scripts for adverts. And my key metric was to try and find out what made this client, this one client, special. If you can do that, then it's about coming up with the message and the platform, etc. And then very importantly, I've highlighted in red, what is your plan for recovery? What are you planning to do if you are here and you want to be here? What is your plan to bridge that gap? And then let's see, once you hear that plan, and if they don't have a plan, then you can work with them and give them some ideas, but they've got to have a recovery plan. If they don't have a plan, they're not going to get out of where they're going. And unfortunately, it's not going to do well for their business. Pivot is another word you hear quite often in these COVID times. What are you doing to pivot? Are you adding any product lines? Are you minimizing your product lines? What's your best strategy to maximize your bounce back? What advertising commitments do you have? What role do you see advertising playing? And then your final question, which is to open the door, is are you open to discuss advertising for your post-COVID recovery plan? So what you're basically trying to say is you've got a recovery plan, or I can help you with the recovery plan, and let us factor into that plan to help your business grow again. So it's a lot of information, it's a lot of questions, but for us to help small businesses these days, we're going to have to connect with them. We're going to have to understand them. We're going to have to care about them. And very importantly, like you'll see now, we need to know what's important to them. So I've jumped into a lot of meaty information. I'm going to take a small step back when it comes to dealing with small businesses, and just saying that we have to understand small business. We have to understand entrepreneurs. We have to understand the language that they use. We have to be able to have a meaningful business conversation with them. So on the screen, you'll see there's a newspaper there. There's some entrepreneurship books, some of the top entrepreneurship books that are out there. There's a laptop, which is obviously Google can be your friend. And there's a calculator and a pen and some notes. Is that if you're wanting to speak to, deal with, and build a relationship with a small business owner, you really need to understand their business. So your business acumen needs to be in a good place. I love Nelson Mandela, love his quotes. And this one doesn't relate specifically to small business, but it really stood out for me is if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Now, I know he's speaking here about vernacular, but what I'm stretching this to is if you can speak the same language as a small business owner, if you can understand profit and loss, expenses, and the day-to-day language that they use, and you can speak to a business owner in that same language, you're going to connect with him rather than just trying to sell something to him. And for small business owners, I think that's extremely important, because what they're looking for is help. Remember, they were running everything, and now they're slowly but surely stepping back, and they've appointed people to run certain things, but they definitely feel like they need to run things. So they want to rely on people that are experts in their industry. So we've got a phrase here at Chris Radio. It's not an official title, but we always strive to be a trusted business advisor. Instead of a salesperson or a media consultant or an account executive, we want to be a trusted business advisor so we can consult with and advise our clients on business in general, on media, on communication, etc. To do that, you've got to do it from a place of knowledge. So you've got to build your knowledge base. You've got to build your business acumen. You've got to understand the industry that you're speaking into. And really, it's about sharing information, valuable information. And there's some very easy ways to do that. Obviously, I showed you can read some books about entrepreneurship. You can read articles and magazines and just build your knowledge. If you commit a little bit of time each day to build your knowledge, you're going to be able to have a lot stronger or more meaningful conversation with a small business owner. The other thing about being a consultant is making their lives easier, giving them information. As the boss, they try and gain information and make judgments. So if you are feeding good information into them, you're building your own credibility and you're helping them be a better leader. So if you find information in their industry or in their sector or their competitor information, and you share that with them on a regular basis, came across this article, it's about your industry, really thought you might be interested in it. That's a good way to become a consultant. We call it non-agenda communication. So if you're communicating with them, it's to add value to their business, not to your own. And that's how you build credibility and trust. This probably could have been the #1 slide when it came to what's important to small business. And I say this specifically around small business because larger businesses, if I look at our business, the top tier of our clients are mature, they understand marketing, they understand the need for it. They've returned to spending money with us quite quickly. The medium guys have taken a bit longer, and the small business guys have taken the longest because their business is so reliant. It's very short term. I was watching a video interview with Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't know him, he's quite a dynamic guy. He swears a bit, so you have to be careful of that. But he's quite a dynamic guy, and his thing is small business is short term. It's not long term. It isn't with a brand strategy in mind. They really want quick turnaround ROI. I think most of you will know that. You can talk about great ideas and great concepts and great brand building, but when it comes to advertising, it really is about quick turnaround and return on investment, especially newer clients that are trying radio out for the first time. They're all about this, lots of people. They just want lots of people. They don't really care too much how you do it, but they just want cues out their doors. They want feet, they want eyeballs, they want bums and beds, they want all the metrics that business owners use. And for us as radio and just media in general, it's not an easy thing to guarantee. It's hard work. So it puts us under a bit of pressure. So there's more of a pressure. If it's an A client and they just want great brand recognition, that's something that we can deliver over a period of time. But if they want short-term results, it puts us under bigger pressure. But we have to know that in advance because we can't actually hide from it. So results is what they're looking for. They are very much about the numbers. Business owners love their business in general. I'm generalizing. Small business owners are so involved in everything. They order, like they'll decide on the coffee that gets put in the waiting room. I mean, they're very detailed. I had a client who had a shoe business, and he would run 1 week a month around payday. And then we would have a set meeting on the first working day of every month where I would go into his office and I would sit in front of his computer and he would pull up his 9 stores and he would look at a week-on-week comparison, a month-on-month comparison, a day-by-day comparison. We'd sit there and he would analyze the numbers with me and speak to me as if the numbers are just as important to me as they are to him. And because they were, because I had a vested interest in his business. If my advertising didn't work, he was very quick to turn it around and to change things. So don't be afraid of that. It just means you have to be a little bit more prepared. We're going to talk about results and some ideas, some practical ideas about how you can measure results, etc., a little bit later on. But you can't be afraid of the numbers. The other thing you need to do is have the conversation upfront about what objectives he wants to reach. And it has to be realistic. Sometimes clients can have an incorrect idea of what they're going to receive. I remember sitting opposite a motor dealer and he was trialing radio, testing it out. So I would say to him, well, how many vehicles do you want to move? He wanted to run a sale. And he said, I want to sell 200 cars. So I said, okay, that's great. How many cars did you sell last weekend? No, I sold 14. So I said, well, 14 to 200 is a little bit of a steep jump. Have you ever hit 200 cars? No, the most we've ever sold is 30 cars. So then you have that meaningful, realistic conversation with them and say, well, 200 cars is not reasonable. How about we aim for your best month ever? So if we hit your best month ever from our campaign, then that's going to be a win. Great. Okay, cool. That's our objective is 30. But what is your break even? How many cars do you have to sell to cover the cost of this? Okay, it might be 5 cars. And then we set benchmarks within that. And you know what, it's a nerve-wracking thing to sit in front of a client where you don't know. That famous quote about advertising, 50% of advertising works and 50% of advertising doesn't work, but no one can tell you which 50%. It's a daunting task, but can I tell you that conversation is going to come up. It's either going to come up before or it's going to come up after. If it goes exceptionally well, the after conversation is great. If it does not go exceptionally well, that after conversation is horrendous. And you would rather have that upfront conversation than have unmet expectations. And I had a client, same thing, it was a BEE consultancy. We ran some advertising with them. And she phoned me and said, I'm very disappointed with the results. We only had 15 leads come in yesterday. And I said, that is phenomenal. At East Coast Radio, we push advertising out through adverts on air, and we have probably 1 to 3 leads that come in a day. So 15 is absolutely phenomenal. So I didn't have that upfront conversation and set those expectations. So important to do. And again, it's a business conversation. You've got to be realistic and have those conversations upfront. Okay, what's important to business owners? They hate hidden costs. So hopefully you would have spotted the gentleman with the helmet that's camouflaged against the wall. I love finding fun photos, as you can see. So they hate hidden costs. They hate it, absolutely hate it. It doesn't matter if it's a small cost or if it's a big cost. I had a conversation with a client once, many, many years ago when I was still new to radio. Quoted everything. He went and presented to his directors, and I had left out the production cost. And he had only seen that when he walked into the meeting. And he phoned me and blasted me from a heavy height. Now, the quote, I think, was 50,000 Rand for advertising. And the production cost at that time was probably 2,000 or 3,000. I can't remember. But it wasn't about the amount. It was that it was a hidden cost. And to a business owner who watches their numbers and watches their cash flow on a daily, there cannot be any hidden cost. You've got to make sure that your production cost is detailed upfront, that you mention whether it includes VAT or excludes VAT that create problems. If presenters get certain fees that are not in your proposal or your conversation, you need to detail that. For them, cash is king. So cash flow is king, especially now they're quite sensitive. And all of this relates to trust. It really is about expectations met, the right information, credible information, doing what you say you would do, let your yes be yes, not breaking any promises, meeting deadlines, etc. You've got to be able to build trust with small business owners, because what I said later on in the presentation is with a small business owner, it's the smallest point of friction and they exit, and then you won't get them back and they're lost forever. So someone spoke about trust and they said it's almost like a plate of glass is trust. And if you drop that plate of glass, so if the trust is broken, you imagine trying to sit and put that plate of glass back together into perfect order without being, that's almost impossible. So you don't want to break that trust. It puts more pressure on us because we have to be very detailed in what we do. but in everything, your turnaround time, if you say, I'm going to give you the quote on Wednesday, make sure it's there on Wednesday. In fact, deliver it on Tuesday, just to under promise and over deliver. So trust is something that you need to build with small business owners, almost more so than a bigger client. A bigger client works in corporate, they might understand, they might be a little bit more forgiving. A small business owner is very involved in the small details. So we need to make sure that we build and maintain the trust. It's very difficult to do. Wherever we are in our business, whether we are a small radio station, a large radio station, we need to operate as an individual and as a brand with a sense of excellence. I love the scripture that says, be excellent at what is good. Love that scripture, but I think you need to apply it in everything. So if you're going to be putting a quote together, make sure it's the best quote that you've ever put together. If you're going to be helping a client, make sure that you giving the absolute extra care that you can, that you investigate in their business, you're doing your research, you're giving them the best possible solution that you can. Because like I say, if there's a point of friction, if there's something that's not done, a delivery that's not, a quote that's not received on time, or the advert doesn't flight on time, or whatever it is, it's a point of friction, they're gone. And then they label you and radio all together. Then the very next person that comes knocking on the door that says, I want to present some radio solutions to you, they would have labeled the whole of radio as bad. So we have to, for radio's sake, for our brand's sake, and for our own personal brand, we have to be excellent at what is good. All right. The one thing I didn't say at the beginning of this is that a lot of this is just my personal experience and thoughts in my time in radio. It is information that possibly a lot of you will know already. It's not rocket science. It's straightforward information. I've kept it relatively straightforward because I really believe the basics are the basics because they're important. So a lot of this is basics, and you would have this information already. As we get to the practical tips, I'm hoping to share some practical insights. And if there are any specialized or sort of more advanced questions that relate to small business, happy to answer those in the Q&A session at the end. But yeah, it is important to note that there are challenges with working with small businesses. It's not smooth sailing. In fact, I tend to invest more time with smaller businesses than I do with larger businesses, although the revenue is a lot higher at the top end of the scale. But I have a soft spot for small business. A family that I've got is in small business, and I've just built a really good relationship with some small business owners. So yeah, so the first challenge that they're having post-COVID or during COVID and just in general is small businesses cut budgets all the time. Their budgets are not determined on often a broader marketing strategy. It really is determined on their cash flow. They want to meet objectives, but they've got a very limited budget to do that. So we need to work within that. Price point packages or creative solutions are very, very important. As community radio, obviously it depends on your pricing strategy and how you operate, but you need to have specific packages drawn up for small businesses. And it's almost illogical in that your larger clients who can afford to spend more, if you apply like a bulk buying discount mentality, they should get a better rate. My opinion is actually slightly different in that a small business who has a smaller budget needs to reach a specific threshold of effectiveness. They need to reach a specific frequency for it to be effective for them. So my opinion is I give generally slightly healthier discounts and better packages for the smaller businesses so that it is more effective for them. They need that value a little bit more. This, unfortunately, is one of the other challenges, is that they are bombarded with possible solutions. They have all sorts of media chatting to the small business owner saying, spend with us, spend with us. And as much as multiple platform solutions are a great solution for most businesses, it's the most effective to spend in strategic places, but multiple places. Small business owners generally, they'll focus on one or two, possibly even three media. So you need to carve out a space within their budget. If it's going to work for them, you need to carve out a space in their budget to get their attention. And in a way, amongst all of the possible solutions that are out there and other radio stations that are pitching for their business, you need to stand out. You as a brand, but you as an individual, because it really is, in small business, it really is about relationship as well. You have to build a solid relationship with the business owner before they would be willing to commit spend, and you have to maintain that relationship and that trust over time. So you have to find a way to stand out. The other thing that you're battling is this digital age that we're living in. In a lot of ways, there is an attraction to digital. It's often in the news, a lot of people on social media and joining social media and interacting on social media. So it becomes a this or this conversation in the mind of a small business owner who's got a limited budget. They've got someone that runs their social media for them and keeps the costs down. If you use it strategically, it can be quite a cost-effective platform, social media and digital to use. So that's what you're up against. I always try get a business owner to think this and this, in that radio is proven to work exceptionally well with digital solutions, either websites or social media, etc., to amplify it. There's tons of research online where you can find studies that have proven that. I know the RAB, excuse me, the RAB has done lots of studies. So many people have done studies. Radio plays exceptionally well with digital. So if they're in the digital space, something that I often will say to them is that it's almost like you have got a children's party in the middle of the Sahara Desert. If no one knows how to get there, then there's no way that the kids are going to come to the party. And it's the same way with digital. It's called the World Wide Web for a reason. It's massive. Having a little place carved out in the World Wide Web is amazing, or on social media, but you've got to make sure that people find you. And radio is a good pathfinder. It helps people find you as a business. So I always try and pitch it as a best friend. But also you need to build up your own digital solutions as a radio station, and that you need to be able to offer other possibilities. So your website, your social media, there needs to be exposure on those, but we can chat more about that a little bit later. So one of the other challenges that you need to deal with is, because they have started a business, run different aspects of the business, unfortunately, their sense of themselves can grow, their ego can grow, and they really believe that they have become a master of many things. Lots of conversations I have with small business owners are trying to convince them on the right message and the right platform to advertise, because they have very strong ideas themselves. They have very strong ideas about what should be included in an advert. They have very strong ideas about what time of day it should go out. And you might have different information. And it's about standing your ground in a respectful way and pointing out what you believe to be the right way to go. So that is something that you really do have to take a stand on, especially when it comes to the content of the radio advert. That's where I have the most discussions, is that owners of businesses will often either want to voice the advert themselves. They will include a lot of information that's really not necessary. So you've got to approach it in a very cool, calm, and collected way, and just use facts and information to your help. And I bring this up because this one thing has caused people, businesses, small businesses, not to advertise with us, because they felt that their opinion was more important than ours. And it really is a partnership. Often I'll say to a small business client is, you know your business through and through. I can't argue with that. But I know radio, and I know what the listeners respond to. So we need to meet in the middle. We need to marry those two so that they work well together. It can't be one or the other. It's got to be the two working well together. But it's a delicate balance. Still to this day, 17 years in at East Coast Radio, I'm still having these conversations with small business owners. But I love it. I love small business owners. So this is another thing, unfortunately, that you do tend to get in the small business realm. I know you get it across the board. But because, again, of the success of the business owner, sometimes they can be quite difficult to deal with. Makes it very interesting to deal with the business owners themselves. So you've got to learn a method on how to handle difficult customers. They will often, like in the pictures, try and make you small and they are big. And you've got to try and get to a level where you are a trusted business advisor and that you respect it. But that takes time. They will often state that they know more than you in particular areas. Sometimes can be quite rude, and they are exceptionally hard negotiators. I remember there was a second-hand car dealership. I won't mention the name of the brand. And every year when it came to negotiating his contract, he would call me into this meeting, and he was the MD of the business and the owner of the business, and he would invite his finance team, the other directors, others in management, and it would be this us against me kind of approach. And he would literally shout commands, and he would say to the finance person, go and get me, how much have I invested with East Coast Radio? Give me the numbers. And then he would slap it down on the desk and point to the numbers of how much he's invested. And that was just his method of negotiation. And I would sit there, because I knew him very well, sit there quietly and just let him get it all out. And then I would ask very respectfully, I almost said his name, I won't say his name, have you covered everything you want to cover? Can I respond now? And I would respond, and I would tackle it case by case and just give all the information. You've got to be prepared for those kind of negotiations. And then he would explode again, and I would just bring it down again. And you've almost got to be coming in an opposite spirit. If they are a tough negotiator, you need to be cool, calm, and collected. If they are the silent but just staring at you, I have a lot of those clients that just look at me like I've done something really wrong, then you need to be the conversational, try and lure them out. But it's a difficult art that you have to learn over a period of time. But if you build trust and credibility with the clients, that goes a long way to helping with this part of it. All right, so we're getting to some practical ideas, and we're getting to the end of the conversation. There's the last few slides. I always like to add some practical ideas and things that we've learned over time, so that hopefully there's something that you've learned from this. The first few slides have all been back to basics, and you could probably have told me all of that stuff. Hopefully you've learned something there. It's been a refresher. But these next few are practical tips in dealing with small businesses, some ideas that we've learned over time. And it really is about knowing your audience, making sure that your radio listeners, that you have an understanding of who they are, who they respond to, what they like, what they don't like. We've just launched, or fairly recently launched, a digital station, which is catering for mainly the 50+ market. And East Coast Radio caters mainly for the 25 to 49 market. And the mentality and how they consume and how they react is so completely different. And yet this 50+ market was listening to East Coast Radio and is slowly migrating across, but a completely different mindset, in that they are not a reactive group. They don't enter competitions. They don't respond to surveys. They don't respond to discount vouchers. They're non-responsive. And it's a difficult market to quantify to an advertiser who is pushing for that response. So that's why I say you've got to know your listenership. Are they responsive? If you have an event or an outside broadcast, do they come? Do they email? Do they interact on your social media? You've got to understand your audience before you link some of these ideas to potential clients. So starting off, and something that's worked exceptionally well for East Coast Radio, and I really mean that. We've done a seminar sale, and it sounds very simplistic, but it's really not. It's a big program that we run, has been our most successful new business acquisition program, in that it contributes 30 to 40, sometimes 50% of our total revenue for the year comes from this one program. Obviously, COVID affected things. We're about to launch the second version of that, so I'm sure I'll keep you updated on how that goes. But it is a seminar sale. It's about building, and in simplistic terms, it's about building a database of leads of potential customers that you think would benefit from your listenership. It is then about getting them into a room. I know COVID times, that's probably not practical now, so we're doing it virtually for now, but normally it's getting them into a room, giving them information that will benefit them as a business. So we get an external consultant in who is from New Zealand, and he speaks for an hour on effective communication, the psychology of consumers, digital advertising. He just speaks on information that is going to be valid to small and medium businesses. So when they leave that place, they've left with practical information that's going to help their business. So that's the premise, to get them interested. Then we follow that up with making a specific offer to the target market that's in the room. So generally we aim for small and medium business. And so at the end of the presentation, this gentleman will present 4 packages that we've put together. Obviously highly discounted, but very creative in that they're not just buckets of spots. they're quite targeted at, we look at particular sectors or segments, etc. And so they gain information, they get presented some packages, and it's not presented in a pressurized way. It's really, these are packages that relate to some of the information that we've shared, use it, don't use it sort of thing. But we have an exceptionally high turnaround rate of sales that come from that. And then we allow for a couple of weeks to just follow up. And then part of that process is we help them with their message. So we have, again, this gentleman from New Zealand, another gentleman from Australia that dial in via Zoom and help them with their creative, which is a great added benefit to have. But it addresses the problems. It addresses affordability, so they get a great package. It gives them information, so it makes them a better business. It addresses the messaging upfront and led by experts, and then it helps them. So again, that consultant kind of thing, it helps them execute the campaign towards a measurable result. So that's what we do. It works exceptionally well for us. I can't put more, we chat more about that, and you're welcome to mail me directly. I don't want to take up too much time on that, but it's really, really good. You need to add value to the business to actually get them into the room or virtually in the room. You need to have a credible speaker who's going to add that value, and then you need to create custom packages that are going to work for them. But I cannot emphasize how that works more. So the next thing is ROI campaigns. So return on investment campaigns for small businesses who this is important to. A lot of people will ask me, how do you measure that? Radio is difficult to quantify. How do you measure that before it just gets to the actual sale? So what we have done in the past that's worked well for us is we add vouchers to a particular campaign. So that adds a digital element to it. So they have to go onto our website and they download a voucher, which can be a discount voucher or a buy one, get one free voucher. And then our listeners have to print that voucher out and go to the venue and purchase it. I do have to say that the offer has to be good for them to go out of their comfort zone. These days, with the busyness of life, we have so much on the go in our lives. So to get us to stop what we're doing, go to a website, print something out, take that to another place, to get people to do that is difficult. So the offer has got to be good. We try and make it as seasonal as possible. So if it's springtime and people are getting ready for, we've had research show us that lots of people are moving into the DIY space. They're doing a lot of work around the home. So you might want to target a DIY sector and speak to DIY clients, and then do DIY vouchers where they get a free gift or they get a free assessment of their home or something. But it's a printable voucher which the client then can measure. Also, the other thing is we create a custom sale or special promotion. So whatever your radio station name is, you could use that as a tracking mechanism, and you could say, listen, if you come in this weekend and you say Impact FM, I'm here for the Impact FM special. And if the offer is good enough, they will mention that. It does rely on the client staff to keep a record of all of that. It'll ultimately result in sales, which is then trackable, but relying on the staff of the client is not always easy. Sometimes what we do is we will incentivize the staff. So we'll say to them, the person that gets the most leads that come in or converts the most leads will get a station tour, or they'll get a goodie bag or something like that to try and encourage staff. But it's very difficult to trust their staff to measure that. But a custom sale is somewhere you can do that. Customer testimonials, so we get our clients who've had a success to go on air and obviously talk about their business, but that's not what I'm talking about here. Here I'm talking about interviewing our clients, or the advertiser's customer. So we get out there with a flash mic or even a really good quality smartphone these days, and we would interview the customers. And we would provide that feedback then to the client. So we would say, hi, I can see you walking out of the store with a packet. How did you hear about it? What was your experience like in the store? It's just an added value that we can give. And we can say, listen, we spoke to 20 people coming out of the store and 10 of them heard your advert on our radio station. So that's a great turnaround. So it doesn't cost you anything. It really just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, but it's an added value that you can give to prove to the client that it in fact did work. And then, like I said, staff incentives I did mention. So it's like incentivize. If it's a motor dealership, then you go to the sales team of the motor dealership and you incentivize them and say, listen, guys, if you provide us with the accurate feedback, we're going to give you a whatever, I don't know, a cap or water bottle, I don't know, something small but just meaningful. And then the person who hands in the most leads will get a goodie hamper, or they'll get interviewed on your radio station or whatever it is. But if you incentivize the staff, you find a lot more ownership with them. All right, coming into land, we've got 1 or 2 more slides and we should be done. So seasonal and sector packages, again, you probably do this already, but it's a really good idea. We do it quite successfully here in that people are gearing up for Black Friday. People are sort of unsure of what this Black Friday is going to be like with the impact of COVID, but we'll put packages in front of them that relate to helping their business get through Black Friday when money should be changing hands. Obviously, there's Christmas. Then from a sector package, you've got to think seasonally. So our research shows that a lot of people are doing a lot of DIY now. So that is a sector that has grown substantially over this time. Online, any kind of online business has done well. Pharmaceuticals have done well. So you've got to target those particular areas where the fish are biting, so to speak, and create packages for those sectors. Then the next thing you might want to do is think of sectors that have potential to grow that have been quiet over this time. So that would be, for me, restaurants and hotels. Restaurants are open for business. Some of them are doing very well. Some of them are not. So you could do a restaurant review. You could do a competition that gets people in their restaurants. You could do special deals, etc. But focus on the areas that are doing well, and then focus on the areas that need a bit of help. And then last but not least, from the practical ideas, is digital packages. Is our clients are all, whether they are digitally aware, technologically advanced or not, they are aware of digital. So they are playing in the space themselves. So let us try and help them do better. So we create branded content articles, something we do here, integrating them into your social media to promote what they're doing. If a presenter's going there, we include that. You probably do that already. Competitions are really big for us, and we do that digitally so that there's a visual element. Again, restaurant review we can do on the digital side. And then small clients also love interviews, love interviews. If you have space on air for it, then you accommodate that, that's great. But I know program managers are not always fans of interviews. So what we would do is I see Dave smiling, we would create an interview podcast and we would promote it on air. So that also forms part of a digital solution. So that's just some of the ideas. And then the last few slides and then we're done, I promise. Where to look for small business. Right, so I put this beautiful shop front up here. I wish I could be a client of theirs. Always loved Lamborghinis. But the reason I'm putting this up here is your digital brand represents your shop front. It's the new shop front. So your radio station, website, and social media is where businesses will go to check you out. So you've got to represent yourself well. It's got to have the right information, your website, your social media. And if you don't have a LinkedIn page, I highly recommend that you create a LinkedIn page. It doesn't cost you anything. You need someone with a good eye and you can put that together. These are all ways for clients to find you, not just for you to find clients, which is very important. You want clients contacting you saying, I was on your website, it looks phenomenal. Can I place an advert there? So that's the first step, is for when they come to you, make sure that it looks amazing. The next is when you go to them. So I start easily and I look at your circle as a radio station, but as an individual. Where are you going? Are you part of a book club? Do you love gardening? Do you belong to a wine club, or do you love a glass of wine? Do you only eat organic foods and that sort of thing? That's your lifestyle. That's what you love. That's what you're passionate about. So look for potential small businesses in that realm. So if you are going to the organic food store to buy your almond flour, then you might want to check where it's made and make contact with the person and say, hey, I use your almond flour, have been for years. It is phenomenal. I really think our listeners would respond well to that. Can I set up a meeting? And it's the same with the glass of so many South African wines. Obviously, that might be virtual unless your station is in Cape Town or they're willing to fund you to go to Cape Town to go and do a wine tour to get business. But look where you are. You are a consumer. That's the easiest bridge. Sales is really about building a bridge with a small business to get them onto your station. So look where you are and build that bridge. Obviously, there's other media, which I'm sure you're all looking in already. So business, newspapers, magazines, websites, social media, etc. The other thing which will come back once COVID finally goes away is events. Events for me are the greatest source of leads. You go to an engineering convention or a hospitality convention. in one room, you could have 50, 100, 200 companies that you could have great startup conversations with that could lead into business. Some quirky ideas, some not so quirky. Something I do when I travel is that I will put into Google, on Google Maps, I'll say head office near me. And it's such a simple thing. And you can find head offices near you, choose one that sounds good and target it. You could, like I have seen over here, small business head office near me, to find those smaller businesses that are not taken care of by someone that you can go and show some love to. My favorite place for finding great small businesses is awards. There's so many. I mean, these are just 4 that I found in the first 5 minutes of 4 different award sites that list business awards. A lot of them are small business. If they big business, they normally have categories. They have small, medium, and large business, etc. And I will contact them and I say, listen, I've just seen that you have won the award for the best plumber in KZN. That is phenomenal. I think more people need to know about that. Can we set up a meeting with you? We'd like to interview you. And we've got a great package where we can talk about what helped you win that award. And again, it's just creating a bridge. Small business owners are passionate about their business. They win an award. They want people to know. So that's an easy one to do. The bottom left-hand side is the Chamber of Commerce. You've got Johannesburg, you've got Pretoria, you've got a Chamber of Commerce everywhere you go to. If you are connected with them, sometimes you can get access to their database. Maybe you can attend a meeting and talk to them about a meaningful topic like being prepared for interviews. If you ever interviewed, you can give them practical tips on how to be prepared for a radio interview. And then you can open the door for conversations, interviews that could lead to business, or they could be paid for interviews, etc. Yellow Pages has been around forever. It's just an example of an online platform, classifieds type platform that lists businesses. And on these platforms, you can search for plumbers in your area. You can search for bakeries, coffee shops, restaurants, hotels, B&Bs. I mean, you can choose whatever sector you want, and there's a hit list of small businesses that you can target. And after all of that talking, it's time for you to talk and to ask some questions. Hopefully you have some questions. Either pop them into the chat, or you can switch your microphone on and let's have a chat live. But I hope you've gained some insight, and I hope it's been helpful and practical for you, and looking forward to hearing your questions.
Great, thank you, Brenden. And there are a couple of questions there on the chat. I think the first one really covers a lot of the things that are thrown at salespeople. Small businesses want to make sure that it's going to work. And there's the whole thing of listenership, which I think is a bit of a red herring. Of course, community stations don't have reliable listenership figures, but I'd like your comment on that as well.
Okay, so I'm just going to read it out so that everyone is aware of it. So it says, in light of the importance of genuinely helping the client to grow, I was about to ask, what then do you come with as an offering to guarantee that this would work? The advertising relationship with your station. I think you partly answered that by mentioning knowing your listener. I'm tempted to ask if small numbers of listenership wouldn't be a challenge. How many listeners do you have? Okay, so it's a very, very good question. So the results conversation, like I said, is important, and it's definitely going to come up. Either you lead that conversation and you have it up front, like I mentioned, or you will have it after, and then you're on the back foot, and the client might have objectives that weren't met. And so I did have one slide, but for the sake of time, I took it out, and it had results versus excuses. And I've been in meetings with small business owners where it hasn't worked for them. And I've come with really good reasoning, but because it wasn't discussed by my salesperson up front, it sounds like it's just an excuse. So that's why I say that upfront conversation is so important. And you would have seen in the practical ideas, there's some ideas that you can have to measure results. Ultimately, it comes down to sales for them, but there are sort of steps that you can have. How many vouchers were brought in? Something else I'll get clients to do is I'll look at their website and say, please, before the sale, check what your website traffic was like the previous week, and then check what your website traffic is like this week. and let's do a comparison. It's an indication. It's not money in their bank, but it's an indication to interest if you involve their website in the conversation. Social media, if you involve social media and you're tagging them in posts and that kind of thing, you can say, how many new likes did you get in that period? When it comes to sales, do they monitor feet through the door? Did your feet through the door increase? Did you notice more people in your store? So these are all indicators towards it. And I always say to a client something upfront to say, our job as a radio station is to get the attention of your target market and hopefully deliver them to your business. How you deal with them and convert them is up to you. And that's sometimes an uncomfortable conversation because I've had to test with clients where I've phoned through to their offices and said, listen, I've heard a radio advert for this particular special. And sometimes their service is phenomenal and sometimes it's terrible. They don't know what you're talking about. The staff aren't informed about the special that was promoted, or et cetera, et cetera. And that's meaningful feedback that you have to give. And you might feel uncomfortable giving that feedback, but that's how you build trust. That's how you build credibility as a trusted business advisor. So when it comes to results, you use some practical situations, but I never, ever guarantee. I say, unfortunately, I cannot guarantee what the result is like. And my favorite thing to do in any situation, a difficult situation, is before the meeting, I will try and translate it to the client's business. So if it is a vehicle dealership and he's asking you to guarantee that he's going to get sales, I'll say to him, if I buy one of your cars, can you guarantee that it will never, ever break down? Never. Not one thing will go wrong with this car. I'd love that to be the case, but you can't guarantee that. There's so many working elements in a car that are beyond your control, very much like radio. We can deliver the recipe because we know the recipe for success. The recipe for success is the right advert, so a good message, heard the right number of times at the right time to the right target market. Once you deliver that, you have an exceptionally good chance at a successful result, but it cannot be guaranteed. I can guarantee these things, but the result is also reliant on your sales staff, on your product, on all of those wonderful marketing things that we have. So there's no guarantee, but we can do everything within our power to make sure that there's as good a chance that it will work as possible. And then the second part of the question relates to the numbers. So that's also a relevant discussion. I had a meeting just before this one, in fact, for our digital station, which by all intents and purposes compared to our main station is tiny. We've been up as far as 30,000 unique listeners, but we average 20 to 25,000 unique listeners for the digital station. It's still very new. We have hardly promoted it at all. So compared to 1 million listeners on East Coast Radio, that's a big difference. So if I'm sitting in front of a client and I'm saying, here's 1 million and here's 20, 25,000 people, it's a completely different conversation, but exactly that. So I would put it in a relative term that they would understand. Small numbers are not a bad thing. Generally means more intimate and better response. Is I would say to them, imagine going to our stadium is the Moses Mabhida Stadium and saying it's half full. So there's 20,000 people sitting in that stadium. I give you a microphone and you can go and stand in front of them maybe 10 times throughout a soccer match, and you can give them your message in 30 seconds and tell them what's great about your business. And you can do that 10 times. That is the equivalent to our station. You have got a smaller, more intimate, more exclusive audience that you can give your message to. And as long as we make sure that the message is good, your product is good, and they can access your product, it's going to be a good result for you. So it's just niche. You can say niche, it's exclusive, it's intimate, it's personal. We've got loyal listeners that respond to messages. So you sell what you're good at, not necessarily the comparison for the big numbers. This is not mass, this is niche. And can I tell you, the conversations with a lot of advertisers these days, not so much small businesses, they'll get there, is about exclusive audiences. We have a very large medical aid company that sponsors our events, and they sponsor our biggest event, and there's 31,000 people that do that walk. It's a massive event. They've sponsored it for many years. They've pulled that sponsorship now because they're looking for niche events. So they're looking for smaller, more representative, diverse groupings of people. And so community stations, you have, when it comes to radio, you have that benefit that you don't. When I'm speaking to an East Coast Radio audience, they are so diverse. There's such a range. So to deliver a specific target market to a client does become a little bit more difficult. Whereas a community station might still have a diverse grouping, but because they are part of a smaller family, generally that response rate can be quite high, and generally also very loyal listeners that listen to community. So it can count in your favor. All right, the next question. Thank you, GNCR. You guys are awesome. I listen to you often. Advice on a winning format for websites. Can it ever be too busy? Yes, it can be too busy. The winning format for websites. So I'll give you East Coast Radio terms. So when I was in sales, I used to win the Digital Sales Award year upon year upon year, because back then I saw digital was going to be the way of the future. So I sold a lot of digital. But our website looked a bit like, if those of you a little bit more mature will remember, ananzi.co.za. It was just moving banners and pop-ups, and it was just too much. And so then the station just said, we can't do this anymore. They took the site down. They put up a content-led site. The digital sales tanked. It dropped. But our numbers continued to grow to a point now where recently, I think 3 times now, we have been over 1 million unique browsers, over 1 million. 2 of those times, there were more unique browsers, so individual people that came onto our website, than there were that listened to the station on FM. Let that like wrap around your brain. It's phenomenal. So we consistently have between 600,000 and 700,000 people, sometimes 800,000, but every now and again it peaks to that 1 million. We've found a sweet spot now between content and advertising. So when they first cut all advertising, we went from 15 spots that they could advertise to 2 or 3, and they were hidden away, or they weren't above the fold and all those wonderful things. So we lost a lot of revenue, but we built the numbers, and we built credibility, and we built quality advertising. So we integrate it into the website, into the content. We try and create content that is also advertising. And that we find works better, because let's be honest, us as human beings, when we go onto a website, if we go onto, I don't know, Wheels 24, we're not looking for adverts. We're looking for content. We're trying to find out research on our next car, or if we're looking at a cooking website, we're trying to find recipes. We're not looking for adverts. So our listeners are not looking for adverts. They're looking for content. So if you can create good content that's an advert, that's a bonus. And so I would say it's probably 80-20, 80% content, good content that's updated on a regular basis. That's been our recipe for success, and 20% advertising, but good advertising. You've got to have final approval on the visuals. So when it comes to what clients send through, you've got the right to say, sorry, doesn't quite fit, less text, less information, less this, less that. It's got to look good if it's going to be going on your site, because that's your brand that you're representing. Very much like social media. Your social media fans are not signing on to hear from ABC Shoes. They want to hear from you. So your content has got to create a bridge between the station and the advertiser. It's difficult to do. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time and effort and thinking, but it can be done. So you can do it as heard on. Our presenter spoke to the MD of this company, and they've just announced a COVID relief special. And so you've got to create some kind of link. We find helpful content works really well for advertisers. So if it is ABC Shoes, the top 7 things you need to know before buying your child's next school shoe. That's interesting content. Do you want to wear that? The 5 things, ladies, you need to know about wearing high heels and how it affects your calf muscles. I don't know. I'm making this stuff up. But it's interesting content that establishes your client as an expert. Then they put the information at the bottom with a link to their site, to their social media, etc. But it's got to be content-led on the website specifically. At radio, we're very fortunate is that people have a low tune-out rate when it comes to advertising. They'll sit and they'll listen to the adverts. If there's a bad presenter or bad comment or bad song, they might hop, but advertising they absorb. But on a digital platform, there's a quicker tune-out rate. And Glenn just sent a nice compliment, not a question. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone else? You can go live or you can pop it in the chat. Jackie, you've been very quiet today. No questions. Okay, cool. Anyone else? Awesome.
Great. Thanks so much, Brendan. I think that we've covered it. Just to sum up from the way I've seen it, we've got to spend a lot of time building relationships, doing research, and being creative and working hard at putting it all together.
Yeah.
I think quite often in community radio, we complain that the things don't fall from the sky. But in fact, what I learned in my short time in commercial radio works really hard to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that is so important to work on those factors and to actually put what has been talked about today into practice in our radio stations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brendan. Tomorrow we are back at the same time. We're going to kind of go up a notch and into the different environment of trying to get the bigger clients that work through ad agencies onto our stations. Not easy for, certainly not easy for the smaller community stations, but perhaps some of those in niche markets, smaller towns and so on, it might well be appropriate. So we look forward to having a lot of you back tomorrow and Brendan being back with us. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. See some of you tomorrow. Cheers, guys. Bye.